world is transitioned. Before Second World War, you found it was plural, multipolar. Slowly after the Second World War, it became a bipolar with US and the USSR. And then with the USSR breaking away, you found it became a unipolar again. From there, we are moving towards a plural kind of a situation, which will further go towards bipolar and then further move on to a single pole. This is the transition of the world in terms of multipolarity and unipolarity. Okay? China's ambition is simple. They want to become that single pole in the future. Make no mistake about it. They talk about multipolarity. They talk about world being one, like we have Vasudhaiva Kudumbakam. They have something else which I explain to you later. But the underlying aim is to become a unipole in the world. Make no mistake about it. From bipolar, when it came to the plural world order, what happened? What made that change? The seminal changes took place in the disruptive events. The first disruptive event is the rise of China, and who was instrumental in doing that? It was the US that was instrumental in doing it. When Nixon reopened the relationship with China, and then later on facilitated the Chinese to be part of the WTO, it is the willingness of the US to share even technology and other things with China that brought it up to the level that you see it today. That is the first incident. The second one was the disintegration of the USSR, which allowed the multipolarity to become from bipolarity to become a unipolar world. So this is the two seminal events. Now what is happening? There is a sense that the West is weakening and the East is rising. The point which I want to mention is that we are in an era today where the multilateral institutions are weakening. Like for example, you take UN, you take the Bretton Woods financial systems like IMF and World Bank, they all tend to weaken. And therefore, you find that there is a move towards from a multilateral kind of organizations to a minilateral and a plurilateral kind of organizations. When I say minilateral, it is about 3 countries. It is about plurilateral, goes beyond 3 countries. You can take RIC, you can take Quad, you can take Squad, you can take anything. And then came Mr. Xi Jinping. He talked about a new type of major power relationship, which implies China and USA should avoid conflict. They should cooperate with each other, and they should develop a win-win relationship. Whenever Chinese say win-win relationship, be rest assured, it is win-win for China. Make no mistake. Okay? So this is something that you need to understand, and this is where they said we should not let differences become disputes. They proposed this. Mr. Xi Jinping pitched this to Barack Obama when they met for the first time, but the Americans did not bite it. So it stayed there. But they talk about this new type of major power relationship even today. And the increased influence in UN is something that we all need to be conscious of. Out of 15 organizations, in 9 of them, they have controlling senior positions. So through that, they try to increase their influence. So please understand this. Global initiatives. China started giving out global initiatives one after the other. Please understand, September 2020, the Global Initiative on Data Security came up. That came up as a response to the Clean Network Initiative of US, which came up in August 2020. September 2021, they brought out a Global Development Initiative. April 22, they brought out Global Security Initiative. March 23, Global Civilization Initiative. So initiatives came one after the other. Please don't miss out the proposal for reform and development of global governance. Okay? Global Community of Shared Future. And then came Global AI Governance Initiative. In between this, they've also created an international mediation organization in Hong Kong. So what is the underlying theme of all this? Please look at this slide. They started with that One Belt, One Road initiative. When they brought out the Global Development Initiative, the OBOR was subsumed into that. When they brought out Global Security Initiative, both of them got subsumed into Global Security Initiative. All of them feed into something known as the community of shared future. And if you start questioning which community, whose future, you will get different answers. Okay? In between, the proposal for reform and development of global governance came up. And I have put the other two on the other side. That is the Global Artificial Intelligence Governance Initiative and the Global Initiative on Data Security. That is because that is technology oriented. But all of them feed into one concept, that is community of shared future. This is something we need to understand, because most of the analysts, when they write about these issues, they look at these initiatives individually. Each one of them feeds into the other. This is something that we need to be aware of and we need to be conscious of. All of them are prescriptive in nature. If you read any of them, all of them, and make your notes, you will understand that China is prescribing to the world. Countries should do this. Organizations should do this. ICT companies should do this. So it is a prescriptive form of initiatives that they have been proposing, which puts them at a higher pedestal. So ultimately, when I talked about China wanting to become a unipole, this is what it means. So please keep this in mind. US-led initiatives, of course, if China does initiatives, obviously we have to do something. We have to do something about it. So you find these initiatives came up: Blue Dot Network, Five Eyes, Build Act, Build Back Better World, Indo-Pacific Economic Forum. All these things have come up. But most of them, other than the Five Eyes, have not been very effective. Basically because the government funding was limited. They wanted the private sector to pitch in a lot more, which hasn't happened. So therefore, they all have been weak, except for IPEF. IPEF has gathered momentum. Many of the countries have come together. They've got pillars. In fact, during this present visit of PM, we are going to join one more pillar of that IPEF. So this is gaining momentum. But you need to put money where the requirement is. If you don't put, say, for example, China has invested $1.1 trillion in the One Belt, One Road initiative. If you don't put up at least $400 to $500 billion to match it, I don't think these initiatives are going to be effective. That is where I think they need to come together and think about how to go about doing this and how to go about meeting that requirement. In between, Quad and Indo-Pacific have come up. On Quad and Indo-Pacific, I'll just make two lines of comments. Quad is not a security initiative. I have written about it. You can go onto the net to check. Please understand, Quad came together basically because of the humanitarian assistance and disaster relief that these four countries did during tsunami in 2004. It is a result of that. And they are supposed to do regional development and other activities. They have now taken on technology, the critical and emerging technologies and others. But security-wise, they are having only three aspects. One is cyber security, second is maritime security, and third one I think they are going to add now is environment security. So these are the security related issues that they are covering in Quad. Indo-Pacific is a principle which came up much later in 2017. It is gathering momentum. Both of these upset China very badly. The moment you say Quad, the moment you say Indo-Pacific, they literally jump. So this is actually upsetting them. China, USA, I'm not going to talk much about it, just go through it. Only one thing I would like to mention on the last point, that is the efforts at rapprochement by the USA. The reason is, when Trump came, the relationship went down. When Biden came, he followed most of Mr. Trump's policies. But then off late, there has been an effort by the US to reach out to the Chinese to get the relationship to some kind of base level. They call it that base level. Okay? You find a number of visits by the Secretary of State, the Treasury Secretary, the trade representative. All of them have been making a number of visits to China. There has been an effort at rapprochement in the relationship between US and China from the US side. What is the strength of USA? Before I talk about the weaknesses of USA, please look at it. Whenever the US went into any kind of trouble, it has displayed a capability and a capacity to reinvent itself. You look at the 1929 financial crisis, you look at any other crisis that has happened, it has always reinvented itself and come out of the crisis. So that is the strength. Technological leadership, it is still there, but China is nicking it a little bit. So they have to literally shore up that technological leadership capability. Economic and military might, talent acquisition, they say US is a country of immigrants. Mainly, many of them went went to US, and then most of them worked towards the development of USA. Global presence, please look at the map on the right. You will find today the US has got 750 bases all over the world. And that is how he becomes the global policeman. If something happens anywhere in the world, they are able to react from the nearest base within 6 to 12 hours. So this is something that gives them the capability to be the global policeman. I'll come and compare it with the Chinese later. The influence in the UN I have said, the Bretton Woods institutions I have said, because they all are funded mostly by the US and the West, and so they react to them better. Now, if that was US, which has got 750 bases, now what is China doing? Look at those star marks that I have put there on the map. These are the ones which are given by the US Department of Defense report in 2021, that these 12 places are the ones which China is trying to create bases. But after that, you found 3 more places coming up. One is Namibia, which is at the lower, the yellow star that you see in Africa, the western side, and one above it, Equatorial Guinea. And then last year, they started creating a signal communications base in Cuba, that is just at the backyard of US. So slowly and steadily, China is also building up these bases and to start competing at some point in time. To facilitate that, you find this map. In this map, you see the red dots. These red dots are the ones where the Chinese have acquired either the port or a stake in the port. Okay? There are about 90 plus ports in which they have got stakes all over the world in 53 countries or more. That is not important. What at the moment they are all commercial in nature, which can be converted at some point in time in future. But what is important is please look at where these ports are located. They are all located at the entry and exit points to the seas. Look at the Mediterranean Sea, look at the Gibraltar, look at the other places where it goes toward the Red Sea. So you find the entry and exit points are the ones where the Chinese have been concentrating. And this is simply the way the British conquered the world when they wanted to become a maritime power and then dominate the world. So this is simple kind of correlation that you can do. What are the USA's weaknesses? Please look at these weaknesses. They outsource manufacturing as part of globalization, which is coming back to bite them at this point in time. Second, lagging behind in STEM education. You'll all be surprised when I say this. But the fact is this. The people who went and did STEM education are all people from the other countries like India and China. If you look at the Americans who were studying in STEM education are very, very less. So today, when they want to become manufacturing back into China, back into US, they're having a major problem on this particular account. Outlook of Democrats and GOP, diametrically opposite views. So you have a problem there. All these things you can just read it. The last point is what I would like to talk about, that is the naivety on China and Pakistan. What is the naivety I am talking about? I talked to you about Nixon re-establishing the relationship with China and make them grow with the view that if they grow well, they may become more responsible and play a more responsible role in the international system. That has not happened. But even today, if you go to US, you will find a group of people still holding that view that China will become a more responsible international player in the world. So that is the naivety I am talking about. Even on Pakistan, you find the same thing, blow hot, blow cold kind of a relationship, wherein sometimes they say that they should support them, sometimes they criticize them, but all the same, the support is still existing. So this is something that we need to keep in mind. Next, yeah. The prime concern of the Europe today, if you travel to Europe and talk to people, the prime concern of Europe today is not China, it is Russia. That is where they feel that the threat is going to come at any point in time. And therefore, and they also say, China is a faraway threat, we'll come and deal with it when we have to deal with it at some point in time in future. Little realizing that it is far nearer than what they are expecting it to be. This is the kind of thing that actually runs Europe. It is in 3 groups. Germany, France, and the better economically positioned countries on one group. The neutral countries like Switzerland, Sweden, etc. are in one group. Central and East European countries are in one group. And so the homogeneity of European Union is not as it seems to be from outside. ASEAN, I'm going to talk about only things related to China. Please understand the diaspora of China in this ASEAN countries. It's large. In fact, you look at Malaysia, Singapore, you look at any of these countries, the diaspora of China is large, Philippines and other countries. So that is a thing that actually drives that influence. Second is the code of conduct. You all know in South China Sea, there are 6 countries which have got claims on the territory out there. And that is something that Chinese are trying to contest. And in that, they want to create a code of conduct, which has been under discussion from 2018 onwards, and that is not seeing the light of the day anytime soon. Because my interactions with the ASEAN countries tell me there are too many imponderables in that and too many concerns, and so it's not going to see the light of the day anytime soon. But Second Thomas Shoal is coming into limelight of late. Second Thomas Shoal is very close to Philippines. There is I'll show you this photograph. You look at that ship, which is on the top left, that is called Sierra Madre. This is a ship which has been rammed onto the shore of the Second Thomas Shoal by the Philippines to stake their claim to Second Thomas Shoal. And they position some troops on this particular ship. And they keep resupplying the ship from Philippines. And the Chinese are actually trying to stop them from supplying. See the picture on the right hand side. And you also please look at the size of the petrol boat of the Philippines and the petrol boat of the Coast Guard ship of the Chinese. That is the differentiation between the sizes. And that is what is actually flaring up at this point in time, which has forced the countries to create something known as Squad. Squad is actually Quad, take out India, put in Philippines. That will become Squad. Okay? That is what they are trying to create. They have done some exercises and all. Where it will go, we'll have to wait and see. East Asia, again, there is a lot of relationship between China and East Asia, but look at China, Japan. Hot on economy and cold on politics. Basically because the trade between China and Japan runs more than $200 billion. Similarly, China, Korea, South Korea, even though they had tensions about China, US deploying THAAD, etc., the trade is again more than $200 billion. Look at Taiwan, trade is again more than $200 billion. So trade is something which is dominating the relationship in East Asia and China. This is something that we need to keep in mind whenever we discuss this. DPRK is one of the allies, closest partners of China, and Russia has started going closer to DPRK now. You would have seen Putin making a couple of visits, presenting cars to Kim Jong-un, etc. And that is creating some kind of sensitivity in China. Okay? China-Russia. China-Russia relationship is not hunky-dory as people would like to believe it. There are underlying currents in that relationship which were there existing before the Russia-Ukraine campaign. Even now there are concerns. Look at the box where I have said China is slowly moving into the Southern Caucasus area in terms of Georgia earlier. Now, of course, Azerbaijan, which is a very late report of this month, 10 days ago. Slowly they are trying to move their tentacles into the Southern Caucasus region. And that is not going to go well with the Russians because that is their backyard. So this is something that is happening at this point in time. China's Central Asian republics, they are part of all the organizations that China created like Shanghai 5, which has converted itself into Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and they say yes to anything that China does. Okay, all the initiatives that China launched, the first support will come from Pakistan and these 5 countries. And then, of course, the Middle East, etc. So this is something that you will have to see. There is a tussle for the influence in that region between USA, China and Russia. The countries look at Russia for security as part of the Collective Security Treaty Organization, CSTO, and for economic cooperation they look at China. So they have divided themselves into security and economy, and for economy they look at China, for security they look at Russia. And support for all China's initiatives, which I mentioned to you, and there are certain issues coming up, like for example, the way Chinese have treated Kazakhs in Xinjiang has not been liked by the Kazakhs in Kazakhstan. The way the Chinese contractors have gone and garnered contracts in the Central Asian republics, taking away the opportunities for the Central Asian Republic people has not been liked. There have been actually protests in many of these countries. So there are issues coming up between China and Central Asian republics, but at the moment, China is in command. China, South Asia, this is a large canvas, but suffice to say, I have put the various reasons with each of the countries, but it is suffice to say what I have written in the last line, that China is not having a free run in South Asia, contrary to the belief that China is, all over us in South Asian region. But if you look at deeper research into each country's relationship with China, you don't get that result. The result is, at best, it is a mixed kind of a influence that China wields in the South Asian countries. If you want more on this, I can answer it subsequently. This is a map I think I would like you to have a look into. Please look at the left-hand side where you find this China-Pakistan economic corridor coming up and leading to the Arabian Sea. And on the right-hand side, you see the China-Myanmar economic corridor coming and getting into Bay of Bengal. The reason for that is the Malacca Strait. What the Chinese call as Malacca dilemma, Hu Jintao actually called this Malacca dilemma in 2004. And to overcome this Malacca dilemma, they have to get entry into Indian Ocean. And Indian Ocean is the place from where many of their trade activities take place, and they need access to Indian Ocean region. And this clearly tells, and India is not going to give that access. I mean, I'm sure all of us know that. And that is the reason you find to the west of India and to the east of India, you find one corridor each coming into Bay of Bengal and the Arabian Sea. And that gives them the entry into the Indian Ocean region. This is how China was when it gained independence. I mean, when it became a People's Republic in 1949. And then it added up these territories. To the north is Inner Mongolia, to the west is Xinjiang, and to the south is Tibet. Southwest is Tibet. And China is the only country which grew in territory when it became a People's Republic or an independent country. All other countries got divided, including India. And then this is the first immediate neighborhood. In this, you will find the South China Sea and the Western Pacific coming into play. And then this is the extended neighborhood. And of course, after this will be the globe. All right? So this is how Chinese influence is expected to grow. China is not only in the political and strategic scenario, in the financial system, a lot of things are taking place. And those things are these. You look at the cross-border internet payment system. This is actually a counter to the SWIFT system that we are all using. And that is gaining in traction slowly. The second is the digital currency electronic payment. We are also testing a digital currency by the RBI here, but they have already started. The pilot project has been successful, and they are now laying it out to the other cities in the country. This is something which is going to revolutionize the internationalization of the Yuan. They are already talking to other countries to accept digital currency, digital Yuan as a currency. So this is going to be an important thing. They have also gone into a currency swap agreement with 41 countries, plus Chiang Mai initiative, which consists of the ASEAN countries. So they are into a currency swap agreement by wanting to bypass the dollar. Okay? Alternative to the financial system, that is what coming up with AIIB and NDB. AIIB is Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. NDB is New Development Bank, previously called the BRICS Bank. Okay? These two banks have come up. They are much more efficient, much more transparent, much more following the international norms, and therefore the number of people knocking on the doors of these two banks for loans is phenomenally increasing. As a benchmark, if you apply to AIIB, you will get your loan in 6 months' time. If you apply to ADB, it will take 2 years. So that is the kind of efficiency with which these banks have started functioning. And we have drawn approximately about $4.2 to $4.5 billion from AIIB for our projects here. Petro Yuan, this is an alternative coming to the dollar again. So they went into Petro Yuan basically because the US sanctioned Iran, from where they were importing a lot of oil, and of course later on Russia. So to overcome that, you find they launched something known as a Petro Yuan, and these countries have already signed up onto that. And slowly and steadily, if the circulation of the Petro Yuan increases, you find the de-dollarization will catch up speed that much faster. and then buying large quantities of gold. In the last couple of years, the Chinese have gone on a binge buying of gold. I thought Indians would beat them, but no. 225 tons is what they bought last year, and they have a reserve of 2,264 tons. We have somewhere around 2,100 tons. I mean, we're not very badly off on that. All this contribute to only one thing, de-dollarization. And there is also talk of a BRICS currency being launched. I have my skepticism about it, basically because if that is done, then Yuan will be the ruling currency. So we need to be careful about that. Okay? What are the implications for the world? First implication is China's economic rise has impacted supply chains. We are critically dependent on China for 6 to 7 sectors: power supply systems, auto spares, solar power systems, and things like that, electronics and things like that. So anywhere, if you're critical, you're going to have a problem. And that is what happened with China's rise. Because today, 85% of the world's solar panels come from China. And EV, we don't have to talk about it. China is dominating, basically because they dominate the rare earth elements market. And the reason for that, world has got enough rare earth all over the place, but mining is only one part of it. Processing is environmentally very degrading. Therefore, the countries gave up processing, China took it on. Now 80 to 85% of world's rare earth material has to come from China. ASEAN functions on the principle of unanimity. China effectively broke it by getting into Laos, Cambodia, the relationship that they have. Now ASEAN's unity is gone. Individual countries are not capable of facing the China challenge, including the US. Today, US needs support for facing the China challenge. So this is the state in which we have landed ourselves in. Group dynamics is still ineffective. I told you about the initiatives launched by the US. But they are still ineffective, basically because of the group dynamics within these countries. Lastly, People's Republic of China's domination in maritime domain is, including bases, is increasing. This is something we need to be watching very carefully. This is the last slide. China can't be wished away. Let's make no mistake about it. He's a neighbor. You'll have to live with him. You can't wish him away. Countries will balance China and India. In the neighborhood, they will try to make the best of both the countries. This is a feeling one gets when you travel into your neighborhood. And expectations from India are increasing. They want us to deliver on promises and economic assistance. But we have only a kitty of money which we have to spend judiciously. We can't invest so much of money as the Chinese does. Increased defense cooperation amongst the countries. Position of South Asian countries in India, China boundary issues. If you take your mind back to 2017 when we had the Dolam incident with China, and in 2020 when we had the Galwan incident with China, none of your neighboring countries made even a noise. And that will be the trend. We need to be factoring that into our calculations. China is more sensitive to India's actions. Whatever we do, like for example, you can take Maldives, you can take any other country. Whatever we do, China is really sensitive to what we are doing. And that has increased post 2017, the Dolam issue. And lastly, India's aspirations will be contested. And it will continue to get contested. This is the reality and we have to live with it. And we have to factor this in all our calculations. And the reason I am saying that is, you please look at China's not accepting the proscribing of the terrorists, who are actually being proscribed as terrorists by the UN. They won't allow that to happen. Second, they will never allow you entry into nuclear supplies group. That is the only country holding you back. And third, they will never allow you to become a UN Security Council permanent seat. So we need to be practical, we need to work around it, we need to factor this into our calculations, and I think that is the way we need to go ahead. And thank you for your patient listening.
Cold War is over. Russia is not the evil they used to project it to be, but still in US elections or whatever, you just see okay, more arms to Ukraine, we have to fight Russia, more arms to Ukraine, we have to fight Russia. Why is this still going on that way?
Cold War, the only competitor to US was the USSR, led by Russia. So that mindset has still not gone. And so if at all they find a threat coming up, they feel that it will come from Russia. So that is why US is obsessed with it.
General, it is said that after few years, China is going to have the largest wartime maritime power in terms of number of vessels they are going to have. They are even supposed to overtake US also. So how the US, including India and other countries, are going to tackle this, and are their efforts sufficient?
By the way, you don't have to wait for a few years. They are already the largest navy in the world. They've got 371 vessels and they are already the largest navy in the world. You can question their quality, that's a different issue. But the numbers wise, they are number one. The problem is what I explained to you in the presentation. Like for example, if you have to be effective globally, then you need to have bases all over the place. If you don't have that, you can't sustain operations in a particular period of time in a particular area. Like for example, China has got 3 aircraft carriers. They have not moved out of South China Sea till today. What is the reason? The reason is they won't have the support facilities on the other end. So they have to build up these bases over a period of time, which I showed you in a map, how they are planning to go through. My own assessment is the Chinese aircraft carrier will show its face in 2 years' time from now in Indian Ocean region. But they will not be able to carry out sustained operations. But their capability to carry out these operations is increasing. Your other question is interesting. What should US and other countries should do to counter this? Chinese are making bases, US is making bases. You don't have the kind of money to make bases. So what do? You go for the next best alternative. You get into arrangements with countries to get that logistic support. Like for example, you have signed that logistic support agreement with many of the countries in the neighborhood. So we are also into that kind of a preparation for facing this kind of a thing. But collaborative effort is something we need to be very careful about. It all comes with agendas. And whether you want to get into that agenda is something that we need to be very careful in following. But we are preparing for this.
Now, what is US's role in Tibet? With the visit of Nancy Pelosi to the Dalai Lama.
Taiwan and also to Dharamshala.
Can you elucidate on that?
See, US's interest in Tibet is simply because of the humanitarian issues and democracy issues that they keep talking about. Okay, and they have been at it for a very long time. Right from 62 onwards, you find they also wanted to monitor Tibet from various places, etc. From Tibet, it's a pressure point against China for them. That is the way we need to see that. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your patience.